The opening of Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift has been an absolute saga at Universal Studios Hollywood. They completed construction relatively early. The roller coaster was announced to open in summer 2026, which seemed very doable. At some point in early July, they posted an incorrect opening date, and then it was quickly rescinded, and the park reaffirmed that Hollywood Drift would be opening in summer 2026. At some point in mid to late July, they just randomly opened the attraction for technical rehearsals. These technical rehearsals went on for about 3 weeks or so, and it was very, very inconsistent. And here's where my story with this attraction begins, because I went on day 2 of technical rehearsals in the morning, but it was closed for 3 hours, and I had to leave to go to work. And basically, as soon as I left and I was on the freeway driving home, the ride opened. So I was just kind of like, bruh. So I went back a couple days later, and it was closed again, but this time I decided to stick it out. So I waited outside of this entrance for like 5 freaking hours, just for the ride to remain closed all day long, which was really frustrating. So I took my losses, I went home, and then I heard that the roller coaster was operating from open to close for a few days in a row. So I went back a third time, anticipating that to be the case, and it was closed again. And this time I didn't bother waiting around because I knew that it would be closed all day long. This is the point where I complained on my Instagram story, which if you don't follow me on Instagram, please do that. It's Theme Park Nerd, just like this channel. And then a bunch of people sent me that the HOA for the local community, which has been complaining about the noise from this roller coaster, gets sent testing schedule for Hollywood Drift, and then they make it public. So people have been going off of that, and I had no idea it existed. And I saw that it was supposed to be closed for the rest of that week. Universal would send them another update later. When that update arrived, it was a few days late, and they said that they would be building additional sound barriers to protect local communities from noise pollution from this roller coaster. So I thought that meant that the roller coaster would cease technical rehearsals until the construction was completed, but that was not the case. And then a few days after that, Universal opened up pass holder previews, and that's how I finally got to ride this freaking ride. But even that was a whole process. During technical rehearsals, all of the team members that they had stationed outside of the attraction gave absolutely no information. If you asked anything about the ride, like I even asked one of their team members if the ride had metal detectors, which I later found out on the app it literally says that Hollywood Drift has metal detectors, but for some reason this employee decided to say something like, "I'm not permitted to discuss the attraction with you." And I was just like, what? That's so weird. Like, why? I don't understand why Universal held such a tight leash on these people. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. I bring that up because today, during pass holder previews, our window to ride the attraction was from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So I was outside of the ride at like 10:30 a.m. And they had so many people like screaming at us to get away. Like, we weren't allowed to be in the area, which is absolutely ridiculous because they had another set of pass holder previewers who were riding the attraction, but they had different colored wristbands, so they were allowed to go in. But all of the people with the blue wristbands who were starting at 11 a.m. we weren't allowed to be near the attraction, but like everyone was around the attraction, so their spieling wasn't working. And then they had one of their team members create like a line, and then a bunch of other team members came by and they like yelled at everyone to stop forming a line, and then the team member that made the line disappeared. And then after yelling at us to not be in the area for literally like 10 minutes, all of a sudden they like changed on a dime. Like 6 minutes before 11 a.m. they told us to line up where we were lined up in the first place. So that was just really, really frustrating and very agitating from a guest perspective. On top of all of that, the dude that gave us our wristband at the check-in table said that we would be able to access the attraction at 10:45 a.m. and when we got to the entrance, it was very strictly not 10:45 a.m. we would have access at 11 a.m. So that was really, really frustrating. Nobody was on the same page at all. It was very, very unorganized, and I honestly think Universal Studios Hollywood should be embarrassed. This was really, really bad. Like, I obviously honestly had probably the most negative experience you could possibly have with the technical rehearsal phase. Like, I wasted so much freaking gas, so much time in LA traffic just to not ride this ride 3 times. Oh my gosh, it was so annoying. So this roller coaster was an absolute headache for me to get on, and that's why this review is going up so much later than when I wanted it to. It is what it is. Let's dig into this ride experience. The trains are so sick. There's obviously 4 cars. They're so visually stunning. Each car has a different design. I think it's a real car, obviously found in the Fast and Furious movies, or you could own, but I'm not really a car guy, so I'm just gonna call them car 1, 2, 3, and 4. On our first ride, we rode in row 1. On our second ride, we rode in the very back, row 8. And on my last ride, we rode row 6, which is the back row of car 3. So the only car I have not been on is car 2. The queue area for Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift is absolutely massive. It is insane how many switchbacks they have. During pass holder previews, they did not offer express, which means that the line moved pretty quickly, which I appreciated. There was no single rider line either during previews, which was interesting. The theming is pretty solid. It's kind of themed to an underpass, so it looks like LA and the 101 and the 5, which is kind of amusing. This roller coaster has the exact same setup as Stardust Racers or Velocicoaster, where you have to put everything you have into a locker, which is free, and then you go through a metal detector. Something that I thought was really interesting is that after the metal detector, the guests who are cleared to ride the attraction walk right by guests who are waiting for the locker room. So I feel like there's literally a chain dividing the lines, and I feel like someone could easily sneak into the other line and just take their phone on the ride, but whatever. I mean, Velocicoaster and Stardust Racers have the setup so after you go through the metal detector, you go upstairs. So there's absolutely no way to go from the regular line to the secure line about to board the attraction. So I'm not sure if there will be a consequence to that design decision, but we'll see. It's already very annoying to put everything you have in these free lockers and then go through metal detectors. I've complained about these a lot for Stardust Racers. I've complained about these a lot for Velocicoaster and other attractions like Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. So the same is true for Hollywood Drift. It is kind of irritating for Hollywood Drift especially because the ride does not really go over guest pathways. Like, I think the only time it does go over guest pathway is for the final brake run. Like, even the escalator dive, like, it goes over the covered portion of the escalators. So like, even if you had something in your pocket and it flew to the ground, it would hit the top of the escalator and not a guest. Whatever. The station building for Hollywood Drift is absolutely massive. Part of me was anticipating like a pre-show of some kind, but literally right after metal detection, you go straight up into the station. I remember when this roller coaster was being built, people were thinking that the story would involve you being a stunt driver, and that would tie into the movie making aspect of Universal Studios Hollywood, but that's not really the case. We just kind of have the ability to ride in the car from the movie. Like, it's not really explained why, and there's not really a story to Hollywood Drift, but you know, I don't care too much, you know. It's themed very well, and the roller coaster layout has so much going for it that I don't think it necessarily needed a story. It is what it is. These trains are so comfortable. I really noticed that each car has a different speed dial, so that's really interesting. The restraints are just like Velocicoaster and Pantheon, so they're very comfortable. They did not push down the lap bars when they checked restraints, which was really nice. You were able to make row requests, which is why I rode in row 1 and row 8. If I had enough time, I would have tried to ride in car 2, so I could have said that I rode in all 4 cars, but I'm still really happy to just have ridden the thing. As I mentioned, it was such a long process. But the seats and restraints are comfortable, and they allow you to feel the forces of the attraction. Once you dispatch, you're gonna head straight into a launch, which is like barely a launch. In row 1, you barely feel it at all. It kind of feels just like a propelled dispatch. If you ride closer to the back of the train though, you feel more speed because you reach the top speed of the quote-unquote launch before your train hits the layout. Speaking of, you're gonna curve down to the left-hand side and go through 2 bumps. The train is gonna drift to the left and then to the right just a little bit. The first bump on the ride actually gave stronger airtime than I thought it would, which was really fun. The second bump leads to a much larger drop, which goes most of the way down the mountainside, which is really, really cool. This was one of my most anticipated elements, and I would say it's really, really strong. Obviously, it rides better towards the back of the train because you get pulled all the way down the drop. You get some really strong airtime, however, it does not keep you out of your seat for the entire duration of the drop. I think I landed back in my seat about like halfway or just over halfway down the drop, so still really fun, but it doesn't maximize the airtime. I did notice that the train does jitter a little bit, especially through this first section of the ride. I noticed it less in the second half, which might be because the forces are stronger. But I mean, these trains are absolutely massive, and the mechanism that spins them is pretty big as well, so that's not completely unsurprising, but it wasn't painful at all, so it's nothing to complain about. But anyway, after the big drop down the mountain, you're gonna curve up into a corkscrew, and cars 1 and 3 are gonna spin all the way around while you're upside down, which is another one of my most anticipated elements going into this attraction. I was actually really surprised during my back row ride because this element is really, really fun even without the spin. Because it's kind of elongated, the drop all the way back down after the inversion is really, really long, and it felt pretty floaty when we rode in row 8, so that was very unexpected. But spinning through it is even better. It's a crazy visual facing another car of riders while upside down just for a brief moment, and obviously while you're spinning through an inversion, it makes it much more disorienting. And in my last ride in row 6, which is the back row of the third car, I got similar float to the back row in row 8, but obviously it's amplified more when you don't spin, which is the case for row 8 and car 4. After that element, the train is going to curve up into the mid-course brake run. It doesn't really slow down the train at all, which is nice. The transition out of it is a really awesome spin. It kind of makes you look at the ground before it whips to the backwards position. It was really impressive in the front, but then riding it in the back cars, I thought it was even better. It felt so much faster and more aggressive, especially in row 8. But Hollywood Drift is going to keep things going with a backwards launch, which was a shocking highlight of the ride in my opinion. Backwards launches are really, really sick, and this one has a good kick to it. On top of that, you kind of have an airtime bump dropping into it and an airtime pop launching out of it. So getting backwards airtime is crazy. Obviously, it's nowhere near as insane as Pantheon's backward airtime, but it's still a really awesome pop. I did not expect this roller coaster to have backwards airtime like that, so it's really cool that it was integrated into the layout. But after that backwards launch is the dive loop, which was another one of my most anticipated elements. In the front row, you do get some floater even though you spin, coming up into the dive loop backwards and then twisting forwards as the track wraps around you while you float up a little bit. Sounds like a lot, like there's a lot of different things happening all at the same time, but it's not that aggressive. Like the dive loop on Velocicoaster is definitely far more aggressive in terms of forces, but it's still really, really cool. Closer to the back, it's more tame. You might get some like weightlessness, but not really floater airtime during the dive loop. But you get significantly more speed as the train pulls you back down while you're rotating. The train then hits another launch. At the end of the launch track is another airtime pop, which is really solid. Cars 2 and 4 are gonna spin as the train climbs the mountain up into the stall. It was absolutely bonkers spinning as the train was going that fast and you were climbing the mountain. It kind of felt out of control and hard to process. Plus you can see the skyline of the cities around you, which is really, really cool. Just like the corkscrew, the stall is a really solid inversion even when you don't spin through it in cars 1 and 3. Like you get a floaty hang time sensation through the whole stall, and then the transition out of the stall is actually pretty aggressive and whippy, which was really unexpected for me. That might be the most aggressive part of the roller coaster, but obviously the spinning enhances it. One of my friends described it like the downswing of a pendulum, like Crazanity, how you're spinning at a really high speed. It kind of feels like that as you're climbing up the mountain and up into the stall, which is really sick. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that comparison, but I thought it was really interesting. But I actually like the stall better than the stall on Velocicoaster, obviously because of the spinning dynamic, but even when you don't spin, it feels more floaty. I feel like the hang time is stronger. And the transition out of it is way more aggressive than the transition out of the stall on Velocicoaster. The following valley actually has a launch, but I couldn't feel it engage the train at all over my 3 rides. And then you have this strange element, which I guess is like an escalator dive, because you wrap all the way around the escalators to the lower lot. It's another pretty floaty element. You get a touch of sideways hang time as you're kind of leaning down against your restraint and you see the pathway below you, which is pretty cool. It definitely felt slower in the back, so you had lots of time to process the views. And then you're gonna dive all the way down underneath the escalator and into the final inversion, which is a Heartline style roll. I would say this is the whippiest part of the ride, definitely the most intense moment for sure. During my first couple rides, I thought it was kind of like a baby Mosasaurus roll, definitely not as aggressive as that element on Velocicoaster. But on my last ride, I felt like it tried to eject me out of my seat, kind of like how the Mosasaurus roll does, while you're upside down, which is absolutely insane. So the element definitely grew on me. I'm not sure if that's because it's more intense towards the back of the train or if the roller coaster was heating up. And that's where you hit the final brake run. The trains do a slight drifting, like coming to a stop motion, which is fun. So it's a really fun roller coaster. I think it's very re-rideable. It's not quite as intense as I thought it would be, but that's not really a bad thing. I love floater airtime. I love graceful maneuvers. Like it's well documented that I love B&M hypers, and I'm kind of surprised that Intamin's version of the extreme spinning coaster is kind of like graceful like a B&M hyper, but it still does have intense moments like that final roll that I highlighted. Or if you ride in cars 2 or 4, spinning as the train climbs the mountain into the stall is pretty insane as well. But for the most part, especially in the front of the train, Hollywood Drift has fun floaty airtime, which creates a graceful ride experience that should be very popular and very accessible for the general public. It had a lot of very unique and graceful sensations that I don't know if I've had on any other roller coaster. But it still does have its moments of aggressiveness, especially the transition out of the stall and that Heartline roll. I will say that car 1 is very, very graceful, especially in row 1, but row 8, which we did right after row 1, was so much more intense that it really felt like a different ride. It was a crazy difference. I discussed with one of my friends that the back row of each car might be more intense than the front row of each car. I obviously got 3 rides in 3 different cars, so I'm not certain if that's the case, but that's something I definitely want to pay attention to as I re-ride the attraction. Like, I would like to compare row 1 to row 2, row 3 to row 4, row 5 to row 6, and obviously 7 to 8. Because my ride in row 6 was almost as intense as my ride in row 8, and row 6 is the back row of car 3. So I wonder if the back row of car 3 is more intense than the front row of car 4, and I wonder how intense row 2 is, since that's the back row of car 1, which was easily the least intense of the cars that I rode in. So I think this is absolutely a top 50 coaster for me. I am thrilled to have this ride in Southern California. I hope to ride it all of the time. The first big question that I asked myself after I got off of my 3 rides was, is this roller coaster better than Time Traveler? And I really had to think about it because I love Time Traveler. I think Hollywood Drift definitely has better inversions than Time Traveler, and that's kind of crazy to say because I love the inversions on Time Traveler. But like the dive loop on Time Traveler has nothing on the dive loop on Hollywood Drift, and I would say the corkscrews are pretty comparable. But Time Traveler doesn't have anything like the final roll on Hollywood Drift. And because it's an Intamin coaster, it does have stronger launches than Time Traveler, which is a Mock Rides roller coaster. I would say that Time Traveler does do airtime better. It has better quality of airtime, especially with the steep drop out of the station, the twisted airtime hill, and that little bump before the final launch. But Hollywood Drift does have a higher quantity of airtime. So despite airtime being my favorite sensation on a roller coaster, I think I do prefer Hollywood Drift because of the quantity of airtime, combine that with the better inversions and the better launches. So this is an absolutely fantastic roller coaster that you should come out and ride as soon as possible. So let me know down in the comments below if you agree with my opinions, if you disagree. If you've ridden Hollywood Drift already, I would love to hear. Please like this video, and of course, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. At the time of this recording, we're pushing for 20,000 subscribers, so I would greatly appreciate your help to reach that goal. Thank you so much, everybody, and I'll catch you all later.